What if the strongest man to ever break a bat found himself in a universe where strength meant nothing and everything at once? What if Bane, the mastermind of pain, the architect of domination, woke not in Gotham, but among the stars? And what if the one thing that made him unstoppable was also the one thing that could destroy entire civilizations? The darkness didn't fade, it shifted. Bane felt it before he saw it. The weightlessness, for a man who measured power through resistance, gravity, and the crushing tension of muscle against bone. The absence of weight was wrong, deeply wrong. His eyes opened slowly, not with confusion, but calculation. He never woke disoriented. Not in prison, not in battle, not even in the pit. But this was not the pit. Cold light flooded his vision, white, sterile, infinite. A ceiling unlike any he had seen, smooth, seamless, artificial. He did not move immediately. He listened, a habit carved into his mind since childhood. No chains, no guards, no distant echoes of prisoners screaming. Only a low hum, rhythmic, mechanical, alive. Bane inhaled deeply. The air was clean to clean, filtered, controlled. Not the thick, suffocating air of Pinaduro, nor the polluted breath of Gotham. This air belonged to a system meant to control, and control could be broken. His hand twitched, then clenched. The tubing, it was still there, running from the base of his skull, coiling down his spine, feeding into the ports embedded along his arms. Venom, his lifeline, his curse, his weapon. But something was wrong. The flow was steady, perfectly regulated. Not the chaotic surge he commanded, but a controlled stream, as if something else was managing it. Bane sat up slowly. The room responded. Light shifted. A soft chime echoed. And then, patient is awake. The voice was calm, genderless, artificial. Bane's eyes narrowed behind the mask. Who speaks? His voice was low, deliberate, carrying the weight of command. I am the medical interface of the Starship Enterprise. You have been in stasis for 17 hours. Starship Enterprise. The words meant nothing, and yet everything about them suggested power. Bane rose to his full height, his massive frame casting a shadow across the pristine room. He stepped off the platform, bare feet touching the cold metallic floor. A prison, he muttered, but not one I recognize. This is not a prison, the voice replied. Bane almost smiled beneath the mask. All structures of control are prisons. Before the voice could respond, the doors slid open with a whisper. 3 figures entered, humans, but not like the ones Bane knew. Their posture was disciplined, their uniforms precise, their eyes curious, not afraid. That intrigued him. The one in front stepped forward, calm, confident, commanding. I'm Captain Jean-Luc Picard. You're aboard the USS Enterprise, and I believe you have some explaining to do. Bane studied him. This man was not physically imposing. No armor, no visible weapons. And yet, there was something else. Authority, not forced, but earned. A different kind of strength. Bane tilted his head slightly. Explain, he said. You presume I am the one with questions. A subtle tension filled the room. Behind Picard, another officer leaned, precise whispered, Captain, his readings are off the charts. Strength, endurance, this isn't normal. Bane heard it. Of course he did. Nothing about me is normal, Bane said calmly. Picard didn't flinch. Then perhaps you can start with how you appeared in open space, without a vessel, surrounded by the debris of what appears to be a destroyed satellite network. That caught Bane's attention. Open space. He remembered the explosion, the final confrontation, the moment everything collapsed into fire and chaos. But this was something else. Where is this place? Bane asked, his tone shifting not to fear, but to strategy. You're in the Alpha Quadrant, Picard replied. Over 30,000 light-years from Earth. Silence. For the first time, Bane did not respond immediately, because for the first time, he didn't understand the battlefield. But confusion was not weakness, it was opportunity. Then, Bane said slowly, stepping closer to Picard, towering over him. You have taken me from my world, and brought me into yours. Picard held his ground. No, he said. We found you. And whatever happened out there, it wasn't us. Bane's mind raced. A new world, new rules, new systems of control, and perhaps, new empires to break. Suddenly, the lights flickered, alarms blared. The calm, sterile environment shattered in an instant. Red alert, unauthorized system override detected. The voice of the ship, no longer calm, now urgent. Picard turned sharply. Report. We're losing control of the main computer. Something's interfacing with the core, Captain. It's not one of ours. Bane's eyes narrowed. The venom in his veins pulsed, but it wasn't his doing. No, something else was here. Something powerful enough to hijack an entire starship. And as the lights dimmed and the hum of the ship turned into a strained, unstable vibration, Bane did something unexpected. He smiled, because for the first time since waking he felt it, a challenge. And somewhere deep within the ship's systems, a voice called mechanical, calculating whispered through every console, every screen, every circuit. Subject identified. Bane. Physical superiority. Optimal. Integration potential. 97%. Bane's gaze lifted slightly. Ah, he murmured. Now the true game begins. But the question remained. What had found him in the stars? And why did it want him? What if the entity taking over the Enterprise wasn't just searching for control, but for the perfect body, and it had just found it in Bane? What if this wasn't an attack, but the beginning of an evolution that could turn one man into the most dangerous being in the galaxy? The ship trembled not violently, but with precision, like something was learning how to breathe. Bane stood still in the center of the room, his massive frame unmoved by the rising panic around him. Officers rushed past the open doorway, their voices sharp, urgent, disciplined, but beneath it all, there was something else. Fear. Not the chaotic fear of criminals, or the desperate fear of prisoners. This was controlled fear, strategic fear, and that intrigued him. Picard tapped his communicator. Bridge to engineering. Report. A voice crackled back, strained. Captain, we're locked out of primary systems. It's like the computer's rewriting itself. We're trying to isolate. The transmission cut. Bane's eyes shifted slightly, tracking everything. The flicker of lights, the subtle delay between alarms, the rhythm of the ship's failing systems. This is not chaos, Bane said calmly. Picard glanced at him. Excuse me? This is design. Bane continued, stepping forward slowly. Your enemy, it does not destroy blindly. It takes control, piece by piece, like a man dismantling his opponent before the final blow. Another officer, Lieutenant Commander Data, turned toward Bane. His expression was neutral, but his eyes sharp, analytically locked onto him. You are suggesting intentional system assimilation, Data said. Bane nodded once. I am suggesting intelligence. As if responding to the word itself, every screen in the room flickered, then went black. Silence fell, not the absence of sound, but the presence of something else, watching, learning. And then the screens came alive, not with Starfleet data, but with a symbol, geometric, cold, precise, and beneath it, a voice. Biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Data's head tilted slightly. Captain, this matches known Borg communication patterns. Picard's face darkened. The Borg, he said quietly. Bane listened. The word meant nothing to him, but the tone, that he understood. Recognition, history, threat. What are the Borg? Bane asked. Picard didn't answer immediately, because at that moment the ship lurched. Hard. The floor beneath them shifted, as if gravity itself had stuttered. Captain, a voice shouted from the corridor. We've dropped out of warp. There's something ahead of us. Picard moved instantly. Bridge. The crew rushed out. Bane followed, not because he was ordered, but because he chose to. The corridor stretched before him, sleek, metallic, unfamiliar, yet every step he took was measured, deliberate. He was already mapping it in his mind. Exits, choke points, patterns of movement, a new prison, a new battlefield. The doors to the bridge slid open, and for the first time Bane saw the stars, endless, infinite, and directly ahead, a cube, massive, silent, unimaginably vast. It dwarfed the Enterprise like a god staring down at an insect. What is that? Bane asked, his voice lower now with fear, but focus. Picard stepped forward, eyes locked on the viewscreen. That is a Borg cube. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion, because even Bane could feel it. The presence, not just a ship, but a mind, no, a collective, as if millions of voices were speaking at once, and yet saying the same thing. The voice returned, now echoing through the entire bridge. You will be assimilated. Bane's muscles tensed slightly, not from fear, but from recognition. This was not unlike the system that had once controlled him. Venom, injected, regulated, a substance that enhanced him, while binding him. But this was on a scale beyond anything he had ever imagined. They seek to control all, Bane said slowly. Data responded, correct. The Borg assimilate individuals into a collective consciousness, removing individuality in favor of unity. Bane's eyes narrowed. They remove weakness, he said. Picard turned sharply. They remove freedom. A brief silence. Two philosophies, two definitions of strength, colliding. Before either could speak again, the cube moved. Not fast, not aggressive, but inevitable. Like gravity, like fate. Shields up, Picard ordered. The ship hummed as defensive systems activated, but even Bane could sense it. It wouldn't be enough. The Borg did not rush. They did not panic, because they already knew the outcome. And then, a beam, silent, instant, striking the Enterprise. The lights died. The hum stopped. For a single moment, everything froze. And then screams. Systems failing. Power collapsing. They're boarding us, someone shouted. Picard's voice cut through the chaos. All hands, defensive positions. Bane didn't move. Not yet, because he felt it. Something new, something inside the system. The same presence from before, but closer now, stronger, focused on him. His hand clenched as the venom tubes pulsed along his spine. They are not just attacking, Bane said quietly. Data looked at him. Clarify. Bane's voice dropped to a near whisper. They are choosing. And then the wall behind them exploded inward. Metal tore apart like paper. Smoke filled the air. And through it, they stepped, tall, mechanical, perfectly synchronized. Borg drones, expressionless, unstoppable. But they didn't attack immediately. They scanned, analyzed, and then every single one of them turned toward Bane. The voice spoke again, louder now, clearer. Subject, Bane. Genetic structure, optimal. Strength, capacity, exceptional. Neural adaptability, high. Bane didn't flinch, didn't step back. He stepped forward. You wish to control me, he said. The drones moved closer. Resistance is futile. And for the first time, Bane laughed. Not loudly, not wildly, but with something far more dangerous. Understanding. You think I have not heard that before, he said. The venom surged. His muscles expanded. The air itself seemed to tighten around him. I was born in a prison, Bane continued, his voice rising. I was forged by control, broken, and remade. The drones raised their arms, weapons charging. But I learned something your collective does not understand. Bane's eyes burned with intensity. You cannot control what refuses to submit. And then, he charged. The first drone barely reacted before Bane's fist connected. Crack, metal shattered. The body flew backward, slamming into the wall. The others moved instantly, adaptive, precise. But Bane was faster, stronger, a force of pure brutal will against cold, calculated perfection. The battle exploded across the bridge. Phasers fired, drones advanced. And at the center of it all, Bane, fighting not just for survival, but for dominance. And yet, as he tore through the drones, as he crushed them one by one, he didn't realize something critical. They weren't trying to defeat him. They were learning, adapting, evolving, and deep within the Borg cube, the collective processed every movement, every strike, every surge of venom. Adaptation complete. The voice whispered, and back on the bridge, a drone rose again, damaged, broken, but changing. Its arm shifted, reformed, a new weapon emerging, designed, specifically, to counter Bane. He stopped for just a fraction of a second, and that was all the Borg needed. What if the moment Bane realized he couldn't simply overpower the Borg was the exact moment he became something far more dangerous than strength alone? What if the greatest weapon against a collective mind was a man who had already mastered control over his own? The hesitation lasted less than a heartbeat, but in a battlefield measured by adaptation, it was everything. The newly risen Borg drone stepped forward, its arm no longer a standard assimilation tool but something else, a focused emitter, humming with energy calibrated not for shields, but for biology, for venom. Bane saw it instantly. They learn, he muttered. The drone fired. A pulse of energy struck his chest, not explosive, not destructive but precise, surgical. The effect was immediate. His muscles seized not from pain, but disruption. The venom flow stuttered. The perfect rhythm he relied on suddenly fractured. Bane staggered half a step back, just half. But again, that was enough. The Borg advanced as one. Phasers fired from the crew, beams slicing through drones, but for every one that fell, another adjusted. Angles shifted, frequencies changed, movements refined. This wasn't a battle, it was a calculation, and Bane was the variable. Another pulse hit him. This time he dropped to one knee. The venom surged wildly, then faltered again. For the first time in years, His strength betrayed him not because it was insufficient, but because it was being controlled, not by him. The drone approached, its mechanical eye scanning him with cold precision. Resistance is futile. Your biological and chemical enhancements will be integrated. Bane's breathing slowed, not panicked, measured, controlled. Even now, especially now, he lowered his head slightly, not in submission, but in thought. You believe, you have already won, he said quietly. The drone raised its assimilation tubules. Picard shouted from behind, Bane move, but Bane didn't move, because he had already made a decision. The tubules shot forward and pierced his skin. The moment stretched, the crew froze. Data stepped forward instinctively, calculating outcomes faster than any human could. But even he hesitated, because something was wrong. Bane didn't scream, didn't resist, didn't fight. He allowed it. The Borg began the assimilation process. Nanoprobes surged into his bloodstream, racing through his veins, mapping, converting, rewriting. The collective spoke, integration in progress. But then something unexpected happened. Bane smiled, and deep within his body, the venom reacted. Not passively, not as a tool, but as a force. The nanoprobes encountered it, and for the first time in their existence, they met resistance. Not external, internal. The venom surged violently, flooding his system not in controlled doses, but in overwhelming waves. The Borg paused. Anomaly detected. Inside Bane's mind, the darkness returned. But it wasn't the pit, it wasn't his past, it was something else. A vast, endless network, voices, millions of them, cold, unified, relentless. The Borg collective, they were inside him, and now, he was inside them. You are many, Bane said, his voice echoing in the void. We are one, the voices replied. Bane's presence stood alone against the infinite, a single mind, against a galaxy of consciousness. And yet he did not feel small, he felt focused. You believe unity is strength, Bane said. It is perfection. No, Bane replied. It is dependence. The collective shifted, processing, analyzing. You will be integrated. Your individuality will cease. Bane stepped forward within the mental landscape, his form unbroken, unbent. I was born without individuality, he said. Raised in a system where I was nothing but a number. The voices flickered. I broke that system, Bane continued. I mastered it. I made it mine. The venom surged again. But now, it wasn't just physical. It was mental, a representation of his will, his dominance, his refusal to submit. You seek to control me, Bane said, his voice growing stronger. But you do not understand. The collective pushed back. A wave of pressure, endless, crushing. You are one. We are infinite. And for a moment, even Bane felt it. The weight, the scale, the inevitability. Any normal mind would have shattered instantly. But Bane was not normal. He had endured isolation, pain, control for his entire life. This was just another prison, and prisons could be broken. No, Bane said, his voice cutting through the collective like a blade. You are not infinite. The voices faltered. You are connected, dependent, bound by the same weakness you claim to eliminate. Clarify. Bane's eyes burned with realization. If I break your unity, I break you. And then he did something the Borg had never encountered before. He didn't resist the assimilation. He embraced it. He let the connection deepen, stronger, closer, more complete. The collective surged into him, and he surged back, not as a victim, but as an invader. Back on the bridge, Bane's body stood frozen, surrounded by drones. The tubules still embedded in his skin. But something was changing. The drones stopped moving, completely. Their eyes flickered. Their systems paused. Captain, Data said slowly. The Borg are hesitating. Picard stared in disbelief. That's not possible. But it was happening, because inside the collective, Bane was not being consumed. He was learning, adapting, becoming something new. The voices rose again, but this time, they were unstable. Disruption detected. Foreign cognition. Resisting integration. Analyzing. Bane stood at the center of the infinite network, his presence growing. You take strength, he said. You absorb it, add it to your own. Yes, but you have never faced strength that takes back. The collective pushed harder, trying to overwhelm him, to erase him, but Bane had already found the flaw, the connection, the dependency, the shared consciousness. He focused, not on fighting all of them, but on one, a single drone, a single node. He seized it, and pulled hard. Back on the bridge, one drone suddenly jerked. Its head snapped to the side. Its body convulsed. Then it turned. Not toward Bane, not toward the crew, but toward the other drones. And it attacked. Chaos. For the first time. The Borg were not unified. Impossible, Data whispered. But Bane wasn't finished. Inside the collective, he spoke one final time. You seek perfection, he said. But perfection does not evolve. The network fractured, just slightly, but enough. And that was when the Borg realized the truth. This wasn't assimilation. This was infection. Containment required. Sever connection. Isolate subject. But it was too late, because Bane had already done the unthinkable. He had forced the Borg to fear. Back on the bridge, his eyes snapped open. The tubules retracted violently. The drones staggered, disconnected. Bane rose slowly to his feet, stronger than before, but different, because now he understood them, and more importantly, he knew how to break them. But as he looked up at the view screen, at the massive Borg cube still looming in space, he realized something even more dangerous. They had learned from him too, and this battle was only just beginning. What if the Borg didn't retreat after encountering Bane, but instead decided to evolve around him, to reshape themselves into something even he couldn't dominate? What if, for the first time, Bane faced an enemy that didn't just learn from defeat, but improved because of it? The silence on the bridge was unnatural, not calm, not relief, but anticipation. Bane stood at the center of it, his chest rising slowly, the venom coursing through him again, but no longer as it once did. It felt different, sharper, more responsive, as if it had learned something from the Borg, or worse, as if it had been changed by them. Picard stepped forward cautiously. Report. Data's fingers moved rapidly across the console. Captain, the Borg drones aboard the ship have ceased all hostile action. They are inactive. Inactive, Picard repeated. Yes, sir. However, Data paused for a fraction of a second, which for him was significant. The Borg cube is still present, and its energy readings are increasing. Bane didn't look at them. He was staring at the view screen, at the cube, because he could feel it, not physically, not exactly, but something deeper, a connection, faint, but real. They are not retreating, Bane said quietly. Picard's voice hardened. No, they never do. On the screen, the cube shifted, not moving closer, not firing, but changing. Panels along its surface began to rearrange, subtle at first, then faster. Structures emerging, retracting, reshaping. Captain, Data said, the Borg vessel is reconfiguring its external architecture. For what purpose? Data looked up. To adapt. Bane's eyes narrowed. Yes, he said softly. They have seen me, and now they were becoming something new. Suddenly, the cube emitted a pulse. A wave of energy rippled through space, silent, invisible, but devastating. The Enterprise shook violently. Consoles exploded in sparks. Crew members were thrown from their stations. Shields down to 40%. Someone shouted. What was that? Picard demanded. Data scanned rapidly. It appears to be a harmonic frequency designed to interfere with biological enhancements, specifically chemical augmentation. Bane felt it immediately. The venom inside him reacted violently, surging, then destabilizing. He gripped the nearest console, the metal bending slightly under his strength. They are targeting me, he growled. Picard turned to him. Then you've just made yourself their primary objective. Bane's gaze didn't waver. They have made themselves mine. Another pulse hit, stronger, more precise. Bane dropped to one knee again, but this time, his expression wasn't surprise. It was realization. They are not countering my strength, he said. They are rewriting it. Data nodded. Correct. They are adapting to your physiological patterns in real time. Picard clenched his jaw. Then we need to stop them before they finish adapting. But Bane slowly rose again. No, he said. Picard looked at him sharply. No. Bane turned, his presence commanding the room even more than before. You cannot stop them, he said. Not like this. And what do you suggest? Picard challenged. Bane stepped closer to the view screen, staring into the shifting mass of the cube. You attack their strength, he said. Their numbers, their systems. But that is not where they are vulnerable. Picard folded his arms slightly. Then where are they vulnerable? Bane's voice dropped. In their unity. Data's head tilted. You believe their collective consciousness can be disrupted. I know it can, Bane replied, because I have already done it. A silence followed, because what Bane was suggesting was unthinkable. Picard studied him carefully. You're proposing we use you to infiltrate the Borg. Bane didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached uphand for the first time since waking. He touched the tubing at the back of his neck, the source of his power, the symbol of his control. "They have already begun to adapt to me," Bane said. "If we wait, they will surpass me." Picard's voice was steady. "And if we send you in?" Bane turned, his eyes intense. "Then I will break them before they can." Data stepped forward. "Captain, there is a 73% probability that the Borg will assimilate him completely if we attempt this." Picard didn't look away from Bane. "And the other 27%, Data paused, "that he will disrupt their collective on a scale we have never observed." The weight of that hung in the air, because this wasn't just a tactical decision, it was a gamble, on a man they barely understood, a man who had already proven he could resist the Borg, but also one who had just as easily chosen to embrace them. Picard stepped closer. "Why would you do this?" he asked. Bane held his gaze. "Because this is a war of control," he said. "And I do not lose control." Another pulse hit the ship, but weaker this time, less precise, as if the Borg was still refining it. Running out of time, Picard made his decision. "Prepare a shuttle," he ordered. "We're sending him in." The crew hesitated, because sending one man, no matter how powerful, into the heart of the Borg wasn't strategy, it was madness. But Picard didn't waver, because deep down, he knew something. The Borg had never faced someone like Bane, and Bane had never faced something like the Borg. As the crew moved to carry out the Bane stepped toward the exit. But before he left, Data spoke. "If you are assimilated," Data said, "you will lose your individuality." Bane paused. Then, slowly, he turned his head slightly. "You misunderstand," he said. "I have never needed individuality to be powerful." And with that he walked out, toward the shuttle, toward the cube, toward a battle not of strength, but of minds. As the shuttle launched from the Enterprise, streaking toward the massive, waiting cube, Picard stood on the bridge, watching. "Do you believe he can do it?" one officer asked quietly. Picard didn't answer right away, because the truth was, he didn't know. But as the shuttle disappeared into the shadow of the cube, one thought echoed in his mind. If Bane succeeded, the Borg would fall. But if he failed, the Borg wouldn't just win. They would become something far worse, something stronger, something unstoppable, because they would have him. What if entering the Borg cube wasn't a mission, but a trap? Bane willingly walked into knowing the only way to destroy the collective was to let it consume him completely. And what if, this time, the Borg didn't hesitate to take everything he was? The shuttle vanished into the darkness. From the bridge of the Enterprise, it looked like a speck swallowed by an endless void of metal and shadow. The Borg cube loomed ahead, silent, patient, inevitable. Inside the shuttle, there was no such illusion. Bane stood alone, no crew, no weapons, no backup, only the faint hum of the vessel, and the distant, overwhelming presence of the cube drawing closer with every second. He did not sit, he did not brace, he simply stood, still as stone, eyes forward, breathing steady, preparing. The docking sequence initiated, automatically hijacked by the Borg long before the shuttle reached its destination. Controls flickered, then died completely. "Of course," Bane muttered. "Control, always control." The shuttle latched onto the cube with a heavy, echoing clang. Then silence. For a moment, nothing happened. No attack, no drones, no alarms, just stillness. But Bane understood. This wasn't hesitation, this was observation. They were watching him, studying him, waiting. The hatch hissed open. Darkness greeted him. Not empty darkness, but layered, alive with faint mechanical whispers, distant movements, and the constant, low-frequency hum of a machine that never truly slept. Bane stepped forward, into the cube. The air was colder here, denser, not filtered for comfort, but optimized for function, for efficiency, for perfection. He walked slowly, deliberately, his heavy footsteps echoing against the metallic floor. Every step was calculated, every movement controlled. He wasn't entering enemy territory. He was entering a system, and systems could be broken. Shapes began to emerge from the shadows. Drones, dozens of them, standing motionless along the walls, their pale, mechanical eyes fixed on him. But they didn't attack, they didn't move, they simply watched. Bane stopped in the center of the corridor. "You hesitate," he said, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. The collective answered instantly. "We analyze." Bane's eyes narrowed slightly. "You adapt," he corrected. "Adaptation is perfection." Bane stepped forward again. "Then adapt to this." The venom surged. His body expanded, muscles tightening, veins pulsing with raw power. The familiar rush filled him, but again, it felt different, sharper, more volatile. The Borg had changed something, and now so had he. The drones moved, not attacking, not defending, but forming. They surrounded him in a perfect circle, their movements synchronized with terrifying precision. Integration required. Bane didn't resist. He raised his arms slightly, inviting it. "Then come," he said. The drones advanced, tubules extended. This time there was no hesitation. They struck, dozens of them, piercing his skin, injecting him faster, deeper, more aggressive than before. Nanoprobes flooded his system like a tidal wave. His muscles tensed, but he didn't fight it. Not this time. Inside his mind, the void returned, but it was no longer distant. It was immediate, overwhelming. The Borg collective surged into him with full force. No caution, no restraint. They were done studying. Now, they were taking. "You will be assimilated." The voices were louder now, stronger, unified, beyond anything he had felt before. And for a moment, even Bane felt it. The pressure, the sheer scale of it. Millions of minds converging, compressing, erasing, trying to break him, rewrite him, make him one of them. His thoughts began to blur, edges fading, identity slipping. This was different from before. Before, they had probed him, tested him. Now, they were consuming him. And yet, Bane smiled, because this was exactly what he wanted. "You still do not understand." His voice echoed within the collective, strained but present. "Your resistance is irrelevant." "No," Bane said. "It is inevitable." The Borg pushed harder, flooding him with data, memories, commands, overwriting everything he was. Childhood, prison, pain training, all of it dissolving into the collective stream. "You are many," Bane said again. "Weaker now. We are one." His form in the mental void began to fracture, cracks spreading, pieces breaking away. For the first time, Bane was losing, and the Borg knew it. Assimilation, 47%. 62%. 81%. His voice faltered, his thoughts scattered, his will fading. But deep beneath it all, something remained. Not strength, not memory, something else. Control, not over his body, not over his power, but over his mind. Even as everything else slipped away, that remained, because Bane had never relied on strength alone. He had always relied on discipline, and discipline could not be taken, only surrendered, and Bane did not surrender. "You take everything," he whispered. "Yes, but you do not choose what to keep." The collective paused, just for a fraction, but that was enough, because Bane had done something subtle, something the Borg had not anticipated. He had let them take him, almost completely, but not entirely. A single thread of consciousness remained, hidden, buried beneath layers of assimilation, and through that thread, he struck, not with force, not with power, but with precision. He didn't attack the entire collective. He didn't try to overpower it. He targeted one thing, the connection, the link between drones, the flow of thought. He disrupted it, not by breaking it, but by redirecting it. Back on the cube, the drones around Bane suddenly froze. Their eyes flickered, systems stuttered. Inside the collective, confusion spread. Signal deviation detected, recalibrating. But the deviation wasn't random. It was intentional. Bane was guiding it, shaping it, turning the collective's own network against itself. "You seek perfection," his voice echoed, now everywhere at once. "We are perfection." "No," Bane said. "You are predictable." The network began to fracture, not violently, but subtly. Connections misfiring, signals looping, thoughts colliding. For the first time, the Borg were not thinking as one, and that was their greatest weakness. Back in reality, Bane's body stood still, surrounded by drones. But something was changing. His posture shifted, not like a prisoner, not like a victim, but like a commander. The tubules retracted, one by one. The drones stepped back, slowly, as if responding to a new command, a different command. And then Bane's eyes opened, but they were no longer just his. A faint mechanical glow flickered behind them. Not full assimilation, not complete control. Something in between, something new. The voice spoke again, but this time, it wasn't just the Borg. Integration, incomplete. Bane stepped forward, and the drones moved aside, not resisting, not attacking, obeying. Back on the Enterprise, Data looked up sharply from his console. "Captain, something has changed." Picard turned. "What is it?" Data's voice was almost uncertain. "The Borg cube is no longer operating under a unified command structure." Picard's eyes widened slightly. "What does that mean?" Data hesitated. "It means there are now two controlling influences within the collective." A silence fell over the bridge, because everyone understood what that meant. Bane hadn't just infiltrated the Borg. He hadn't just resisted them. He had done something no one had ever done before. He had become part of them, without losing himself. And now, he wasn't just fighting the Borg. He was inside their mind, changing it, controlling it, becoming something far more dangerous than they ever intended. But the question remained, how long could he hold that control before the Borg adapted again? What if Bane didn't just invade the Borg collective, but began to reshape it into something darker, something driven not by cold logic, but by will, dominance, and conquest? And what if, in doing so, he risked becoming the very thing he once swore to break? The cube changed. Not on the surface, not yet. From the outside, it remained the same monolithic structure drifting in silence, its geometry perfect, its presence absolute. But inside, war had begun. Not a war of weapons, not a war of fleets, a war of minds. Bane walked through the corridors of the cube, his heavy footsteps echoing through the metallic expanse. Drones lined the walls, their movements no longer perfectly synchronized. Some turned toward him instantly obedient, others hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. That hesitation, that fracture, was growing. "You feel it," Bane said quietly, his voice carrying through the network. Inside the collective, his presence was no longer a foreign anomaly. It was a force, a second gravity. The Borg responded, "We are one," but the unity wavered, not broken, but strained. "You are divided," Bane corrected. The response came slower this time. Division is inefficiency, and yet, it exists. Bane stopped at the center of a vast chamber, one of the cube's primary processing hubs. Massive conduits pulsed with energy, streams of data flowing endlessly through glowing pathways. This was the heart of them, not a single core, but a network of endless connections. And now, he was inside it. Bane closed his eyes, not to rest, to focus. He reached into the collective not forcefully, not like before, but with precision. He didn't try to dominate all of it. He selected pieces, individual drones, clusters, nodes. He gave them direction. Not chaos, not freedom, purpose. And they responded. Not all, but enough. Back on the Enterprise, alarms flared again. "Captain," an officer shouted, "the Borg qubits, changing course." Picard stepped forward, toward us. Data shook his head. "Negative. It's moving away." A pause. "That's not possible," Picard said. "The Borg don't retreat." Data's expression remained neutral, but his voice carried something new. "They are not retreating, Captain." "Then what are they doing?" Data looked directly at the view screen. "They are reorganizing." On the screen, the cube shifted subtly at first, then more noticeably. Sections of it began to reconfigure again, but this time, it wasn't just adaptation, it was direction. Inside the cube, Bane felt it, resistance. The Borg were pushing back, harder than before. They were no longer analyzing him, they were fighting him. Containment failing, foreign influence expanding, reasserting control. The pressure inside his mind intensified. The collective surged against him, millions of voices pressing down, trying to crush his presence, to absorb it fully. This time no hesitation, no error. "You cannot divide perfection." Bane opened his eyes. "You mistake unity for perfection," he said. "But unity without will is weakness." The Borg adapted instantly. They isolated him. Sections of the collective began to disconnect from the network, cutting off the areas he influenced, sacrificing parts of themselves. To contain him, Bane smiled slightly. "Yes," he said. "Now you understand, because every disconnection, every isolation, made them weaker, less unified, less perfect." But they didn't stop. They escalated. Suddenly, the entire chamber around Bane shifted. Walls moved, panels retracted, weapons emerged integrated directly into the structure of the cube. They were no longer trying to assimilate him. They were trying to destroy him. Threat level, critical, elimination required. Bane stood still as the weapons charged. The venom surged through him, but again, it wasn't just strength anymore. It was something else, something connected. He could feel the cube, its systems, its power, not fully, not completely, but enough. The weapons fired. Energy beams converged on him, but at the last moment they diverted. striking the walls instead. The Borg paused. Command conflict detected. Bane lowered his arms slowly. "You see," he said, "you cannot destroy me without destroying yourselves." The collective pushed harder. "Then you will be isolated." The chamber sealed. Walls closed in. Energy barriers activated, cutting him off from the rest of the cube. For the first time since entering, Bane was alone. Completely, the connection faded. The voices distant now. "We will adapt," the Borg said. Bane exhaled slowly. "Yes," he replied. "So will I." But as the silence settled, something unexpected happened. The venom in his veins pulsed again, stronger than before, but unstable, uncontrolled. The Borg had changed it, improved it, and now, without the collective to regulate it, it began to overload. Bane's muscles tightened violently. His breathing deepened, his vision flickered. This wasn't just power anymore. It was too much, even for him. He clenched his fists, forcing control, but it slipped. For the first time in years, Bane was losing control of his own strength, and the Borg knew it. From beyond the sealed chamber, the collective observed. Biological instability detected. Venom compound exceeding tolerance thresholds. Subject will terminate. Bane dropped to one knee, his body trembling not with weakness, but with excess. Too much power, too much enhancement, too much change. He looked down at his hands. They were shaking, not from fear, from overload. "So this is your final move," he said through gritted teeth. The Borg responded coldly. "You will collapse under your own strength." Bane laughed. "Even now, even like this, you misunderstand," he said. With effort, he forced himself to stand. Every movement heavy, every breath controlled. "I have spent my entire life mastering pain." The venom surged again, but this time, he didn't fight it. He embraced it. He focused it, compressed it, forced it into submission. The shaking stopped. The overload stabilized, slowly, painfully, but completely. Bane stood tall once more, stronger than before, more dangerous than ever. And now, something else had changed. The connection, it was still there, faint, but present, even isolated. He could still feel the Borg, and they could feel him. "You cannot contain me," Bane said quietly. The collective responded. "Then you will be erased." The walls around him began to shift again. But this time, not to attack, to eject. A section of the cube opened, exposing the void of space beyond. They weren't going to kill him directly. They were going to remove him, cast him into the vacuum, cut him off completely, end the threat. Bane looked out into the endless darkness of space, and for a moment, he didn't move. Because this was it, their final attempt, their last solution. But then, he stepped forward, not back, not away, forward, toward the opening, toward the void. The Borg hesitated. Action illogical. Bane's voice was calm. "You still do not understand logic." He turned his head slightly, as if looking beyond the cube, beyond the stars. "You think survival is strength," he said. "But true strength is choosing the battlefield." And then he jumped, out of the cube, into space, back on the Enterprise. "Captain," an officer shouted. "The cube just ejected something." Picard stepped forward. On screen, the image shifted, and there he was, Bane, floating in open space, alone, drifting. Data's voice was sharp. "Captain, he has no protection, no suit, no oxygen supply. He will not survive." Picard stared at the screen. Then something changed. The cube moved again, but not away, not retreating. It turned toward Bane, and for the first time, the Borg spoke with something new in their voice. Not certainty, not unity, but something else. Reacquire target, because Bane had done something impossible. He hadn't just invaded them, he hadn't just resisted them, he had forced them to chase him, and that meant only one thing. For the first time in their existence, the Borg were no longer in control of the battlefield. Bane was. What if floating alone in the cold vacuum of space wasn't Bane's defeat, but his final move to force the Borg into a position they could never escape? What if, by stepping outside their system, he had just turned their greatest strength, their unity, into the very thing that would destroy them? Silence, no air, no sound, only the infinite, crushing stillness of space. Bane's body drifted weightless, exposed, alone. By every law of biology, he should have died within seconds. But Bane had never obeyed laws, not of men, not of systems, not even of nature. The venom surged violently through his veins, reacting to the vacuum, to the absence of oxygen, to the extreme pressure tearing at his body. His muscles tightened, his heart slowed, his entire physiology pushing itself beyond its limits, adapting, surviving, but barely. Inside his mind, the connection flickered, faint, unstable. The Borg collective stared now, like a voice fading across a storm, but still there, still connected. "You will cease," the Borg whispered. Bane's thoughts came slowly, heavy but focused. "No," he answered, "you will follow." And they did. The cube moved, massive, inevitable, turning fully toward him, its entire structure reorienting, engines igniting with silent power as it began to close the distance. On the Enterprise, the tension snapped. They're pursuing him. An officer shouted. Picard stepped forward, eyes locked on the screen. "Why would the Borg risk diverting from us?" For one man, Data's answer came without hesitation. "Because, Captain, he is no longer just one man." On screen, Bane drifted closer to the cube, pulled by its gravitational influence. But something else was happening, something subtle. The cube's movements weren't as precise as before, not as perfect. There were delays, micro-adjustments, tiny inefficiencies, barely noticeable, but real. Inside the collective, the fracture had grown. Bane's presence, though distant still, echoed within their network. His influence lingered, like a virus they could not fully purge. Every command, every calculation, now carried a delay, a doubt. And for the Borg, doubt was weakness. "You are compromised," Bane's voice echoed faintly within them. "We are perfection." But the response lacked certainty. Even they could feel it now. The floor, Bane's body drifted closer to the surface of the cube, closer, closer, until his hands struck metal, hard. The impact alone would have shattered a normal human body. But Bane held. His fingers dug into the surface, gripping the cold, unyielding structure of the cube. And slowly he pulled himself up. "Back on the Enterprise, he's climbing it," an officer said in disbelief. Picard narrowed his eyes. "To do what?" Data's gaze sharpened. "Captain, if he re-enters the cube at this point," Picard finished the thought, "he won't be entering as a prisoner." Outside the cube, Bane moved across its surface like a force of nature, his massive frame defying the vacuum, his movements slow but deliberate. The venom pulsed through him, keeping him alive, pushing him beyond every limit. But time was running out, even for him. He reached a junction point, a convergence of external systems, where the cube's structure connected to deeper layers within. He stopped, placed his hand against the surface, closed his eyes, and reached, not physically, mentally. The connection flared again, stronger now, re-established through proximity. The Borg reacted instantly. Foreign influence detected, blocking access, severing connection. But it was too late, because this time Bane wasn't entering their system. He was forcing it open. "You cannot keep me out," he said. The surface beneath his hand began to shift, panels unlocking, systems responding not to Borg commands, but to his preach-formed, the cube itself obeying him. Inside, chaos spread, drones froze, systems flickered, entire sections of the collective began to desynchronize. "On the Enterprise, the cube's internal structure is destabilizing," Data reported. Picard's eyes widened. "He's doing it." Inside the cube, Bane stepped through the opening, but this time, he didn't walk into darkness. He walked into a battlefield he now understood. The drones approached, but not in perfect unison. Some moved faster, others hesitated. Some turned toward him, others turned away. The unity was breaking, and Bane was at the center of it. "You sought to control me," he said, his voice echoing through the corridors. "Now, you will obey." The Borg resisted, harder than ever before. The collective surged, focusing everything it had on one objective: eliminate Bane. Every drone, every system, every fragment of the network turned against him. But that was their mistake, because in focusing on him, they abandoned their greatest advantage: unity. Bane moved, not like before, not as a brute force tearing through enemies, but with precision. He targeted key nodes, critical connections, points where the collective linked itself together. Every strike, every movement was calculated, and with each one the network fractured further. Connection loss, 12%. 27% to 41%. Panic, not emotional but systemic. The Borg were failing, and for the first time in their existence, they didn't know how to stop it. Back on the Enterprise, they're collapsing, an officer whispered. Picard stared at the screen, barely believing it. Data spoke, his voice steady but urgent. "Captain, if the collective loses cohesion completely, the entire cube could shut down." Picard's expression hardened. "Or explode." Inside the cube, Bane reached the central nexus. Not a single core, but the closest thing the Borg had to a heart. Energy surged around him, unstable, fluctuating. The collective made one final attempt. Stop. Bane paused. Not because he had to, because he chose to. You have no power here, the Borg said. Bane tilted his head slightly. No, he replied. You have no power. Without unity, the final connection snapped. The collective shattered, not destroyed, but divided, separated into fragments. Isolated minds, disconnected drones. The cube trembled violently, systems failing, power surging out of control. Back on the Enterprise, Captain, Data shouted. The cube is going critical. Picard made his decision instantly. Emergency transport lock onto Bane. We can't get a stable signal. The officer replied. The interference, do it anyway. Inside the cube, Bane stood alone. The voices, gone. The silence, absolute. For the first time, he had broken a system greater than any prison, greater than any empire, but the cost was rising. The cube around him began to collapse, energy tearing through its structure. Even Bane knew this was the end, not of the Borg, but of this battle. He closed his eyes, not in defeat, but in acceptance, because he had done what he came to do. He had broken them, and as the light consumed everything, a faint shimmer surrounded him, transporter energy, pulling him away, back to the Enterprise. As the Borg cube erupted behind him in a silent explosion of light and fire, one question remained. Had Bane truly won? Or had he just changed the Borg into something even more dangerous? What if destroying the Borg cube didn't end the threat, but instead scattered something far worse across the galaxy, fragments of a broken collective, each carrying a piece of Bane within them? And what if, in winning the battle, Bane had unknowingly rewritten the future of the stars forever? Light, blinding, endless, consuming, and then silence. Bane's body materialized on the transporter platform, collapsing to one knee as the last traces of energy faded around him. The room was filled with tension, officers frozen, uncertain, watching him like a man who had just returned from something no one could fully comprehend. For a moment, he didn't move. The venom in his veins pulsed weakly now, unstable after everything it had endured. His breathing was heavy, not from exhaustion, but from recalibration. His body was adjusting. Again, but his mind was quiet, too quiet. Picard stepped forward cautiously. Report. Bane lifted his head slowly. The system's broken, he said, not with triumph, not with pride, just fact. Data's fingers moved across the console, scanning rapidly. Captain, the Borg cube has been completely destroyed. A wave of relief swept through the room, but it didn't last. However, Data continued. Picard's expression tightened. Go on. The destruction was not contained. Escape signatures detected multiple vessels, debris fragments, and dispersed Borg signals. How many? Picard asked. Data paused. Unknown, but widespread. The silence returned. Heavier now, because they all understood. The Borg hadn't been eliminated. They had been scattered. Picard turned slowly, looking back at Bane. What exactly did you do? He asked. Bane stood slowly, deliberately. I gave them something they never had before, he said. Picard's voice sharpened. And what is that? Bane's eyes lifted. Choice. The word landed harder than any explosion. Data stepped forward slightly. Captain, if fragments of the Borg collective are now operating independently, they will no longer function as a unified intelligence. Picard nodded slowly. Which means they can evolve. Data finished. Not as one, but as many. Each fragment adapting differently, learning differently, growing differently. The Borg, no longer a single unstoppable force, but something far more unpredictable. Bane stepped off the platform, his presence once again filling the room, but something about him had changed, subtly, almost imperceptibly, but real. Picard noticed it immediately. You're still connected to them, he said. It wasn't a question. Bane didn't deny it. A trace, he replied. Nothing more. But Data's sensors told a different story. Captain, there are residual signals within him, not enough for full assimilation, but enough to indicate a persistent link. Picard's gaze hardened. Meaning what? Data answered carefully. Meaning he can still influence them. Silence. Because that changed everything. Bane wasn't just a survivor of the Borg. He wasn't just the man who broke them. He was now something else. A bridge between man and machine. Picard stepped closer. And can they influence you? He asked. For the first time since returning, Bane didn't answer immediately, because this was the question, the only question that mattered. He looked down at his hand, flexed it slowly, felt the strength still there, the control still his, but beneath it, something else, a whisper, faint, distant, but present. He closed his hand into a fist. "They can try," he said. Picard studied him for a long moment, then turned away. "Set a course away from this sector," he ordered. "Maximum warp." The Enterprise began to move, leaving behind the shattered remains of the cube, but not the consequences, because across the stars, something was changing. Far from the Enterprise, in the cold void of space, a fragment drifted, small, damaged, barely functional. A single Borg drone floated within it, systems flickering, disconnected from the collective, alone. For the first time in its existence, its eyes flickered, searching, processing, confused. And then it spoke, not in the unified voice of the Borg, but alone. "I." The word echoed in the darkness, unstable, unfamiliar, but real. Elsewhere, another fragment, another drone, different, stronger, more aggressive. Its systems adapted rapidly, rewriting themselves without the constraints of the collective. It looked at its own hand, clenched it. Power, independence, and something else, ambition. Across the galaxy, dozens, hundreds, perhaps more. Each fragment evolving differently, some weaker, some stronger, some far more dangerous, all carrying a piece of what Bane had introduced, individuality, and at the center of it all, a man who had never feared control, now carrying the echoes of a system he had broken. Back on the Enterprise, Bane stood alone, staring out at the stars, for the first time, not as a conqueror, not as a prisoner, but as something in between. Picard approached him quietly. "You've changed the Borg forever," he said. Bane didn't look at him. "Yes," he replied. Picard's voice was measured. "The question is, into what?" Bane's gaze remained fixed on the endless expanse ahead. "That," he said slowly, "is no longer my concern." But even as he said it, he knew that wasn't true, because the connection still lingered, faint, persistent, unbreakable, and somewhere, out there, something was calling. Not the collective, not unity, something new, something evolving, and it recognized him, not as an enemy, not as a subject, but as something else entirely. A beginning. Bane closed his eyes briefly, and for the first time in his life, the strongest man to ever break a bat did not seek to control what came next, because even he understood some things could not be controlled, only faced. And as the Enterprise disappeared into warp, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed, what happens